Pictures of Capitol Hill, where lawmakers are preparing for Thursday's UFO Disclosure Day, not the movie, but an actual one. It's a full day focused on government transparency about UFOs, other unexplained objects in the sky. But one fighter pilot may have already figured some of this out. A stunning new report reveals a downed American fighter pilot may have seen something over Iran that looked more like science fiction than modern warfare. According to a CNN report, the U.S. pilot, rescued after being shot down over Iran in April, repeatedly described a chilling sight: dozens of drones moving together in a coordinated formation, something called a jellyfish formation, drifting through the sky, similar to what you see in this UFO video from 2017. The downing of the F-15 fighter jet marked the first time U.S. aircraft has been shot down over Iran during the conflict. First time a U.S. aircraft has been shot down in a very long time. If the airman really saw what he described, that means Iran has developed a new way to overwhelm some of America's most advanced fighter jets, a sophisticated drone network that would hunt and destroy enemy aircraft. For decades, strange lights in the sky have fueled UFO theories, alien theories. One of the most obvious explanations is adversarial technology. The Chinese or Russians testing something right under our noses. Could have given it to the Iranians. With us now, cultural anthropologist, member of the UAP Science Advisory Council, Dr. Peter Skafish, retired U.S. Marines fighter pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Tom Oltorik. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Dr. Skafish, starting with you. What he's describing, as best we can tell, does it match any of the videos that we've been seeing over the past couple of years?
Well, thanks for having me on. It doesn't match any of the videos that I know of, with the exception of one that I think is so dubious that I wouldn't want to comment on that. But what it does match is occasional reports over the decades of things that do look like jellyfishes, sometimes larger than this, that predate the time where that could have been a drone swarm. So, there's an indication that this could be a UAP not of human origin. Another term for that I like to use and that we're developing is a non-anthropogenic vehicle, or a NAV.
Okay, well, it would not be the military or science fiction world if we didn't have more acronyms. Lieutenant Colonel, there's reporting about this pilot being shot down and then ejected is probably one of the most violent things the human body can endure. Here's CNN's thought on what he went through during that time that he noticed this.
For one, the pilot was concussed from being shot down, and two, this was actually the second time he had been shot out of the sky during the weeks-long conflict with Iran. He was one of the pilots that was hit by friendly fire over Kuwait just a few weeks before that, too. But all that taken into account, this did spark a debate inside the U.S. intelligence community.
All right, that matches my reporting as well, that he had been hit by friendly fire. He was one of the ones who was shot down a little earlier in the war. Colonel, somebody who's gone through being shot at by a surface-to-air missile, the explosion in the plane, and then a concussion and an ejection. I hate to say, does it call into question, but does it make this report credible or not?
Well, I believe it would be credible. That's this pilot's account, as far as we know. Some of it's classified. I've never been shot down before, thank God, but very, very close. I've had missiles very close, AAA, things like that. So it is loud, it's violent. It's mortal combat when we're in that environment. And we saw that. The reports of the pilot are very concerning. It was a violent environment that they came out of. And the ejection itself is violent. That's the second one that this pilot went through in the same theater, which I believe is probably a record. But he was able to walk away from both of them. I'm assuming he passed his flight physical. He's back in flight status, so he's very fortunate in that regard. And we had some intelligence come out of it. Looks like maybe it was leaked, which is never a good thing. Classification matters in national security, but we are learning bits and pieces as we go.
Yeah. My theory, or at least question out of this, is it explains why we haven't heard from either of the two pilots who were rescued in Iran. It seemed as though that's the kind of thing that we would at least either see them or hear from them or have them come to the White House, and we did not. This may explain that. Dr. Skafish, you seem to be skeptical, though, that this explanation from the pilot in some of these videos would be an adversarial weapons system, meaning the Chinese or the Russians?
Well, with this particular case, I'm agnostic, and I don't have enough information to make any kind of call. What I think we're facing here is what now feels like the age-old problem, which is that you have a public that knows to some extent, and increasingly knows, that some UAP really aren't of human origins, but they're technologies. And they're looking to aviators, they're looking to military aviators, they're looking to the government for answers, but they're not fully getting answers. You know, the government's become better about that in the last 5, 6, 7 years. But we're far away from what we call disclosure, where we would have a full acknowledgement of something that I and some of my colleagues know for a fact, which is that there is a part of the intelligence community that certainly knows this is real, which is to say there are technologies not of human origins that are in our atmosphere, they're under the sea, and they're coming down from space.
All right. There's a lot to unpack in there, but Colonel, you I think remain skeptical of this. How much weight do we give one pilot's, or even a few pilots, explanation, observation, firsthand account versus the lack of evidence otherwise?
Well, as you mentioned previously, the fog of war could come into play. You have to kind of evaluate what the pilot is saying against what you know on an intelligence front. The debriefers may actually know more than he knows, and they're just trying to confirm what this pilot saw and experienced. I don't think the viewer should be surprised that there are airborne drone mesh networks out there. They do fireworks displays with these things, thousands of them working in unison. It's not a stretch that they are deploying this stuff in the battle space. There's mesh networks on the ground. There can be airborne mesh networks.
or that this was U.S. technology that the pilots didn't know about. Dr. Skafish, Colonel, thank you both very much.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.